in my senior year at Newport High School, so it would have been late 1980s, 1978. I was very confident as I began tryouts for a varsity basketball team. I played as a JV member sophomore and junior year, and I played some varsity at the end of my junior year. So I look forward as one more year. This time I would be varsity. I would be playing all the time. And frankly, it was socially desirable to be on the varsity basketball team in my school, so things were looking good. So it came as kind of a nasty shock when my coach, also my English teacher, asked me to stay after class. So when we were alone, he told me that as much as he would like to have me on the team, there just wasn't a spot. So he was going to have to cut me. He wanted to do this privately, so I didn't have to go and look at the list. I'd never been cut from a sports team in my life. I wasn't sure what I was going to do or what to say. Actually, there's not much to say. So tryouts were in the evenings, and so I went home and just really dreading the moment when I was going to have to tell everybody, I don't have to go to the gym today because I got cut today. Very humiliating, I thought. And my friends the next day, what am I going to say? So again, I was thinking, I'm in the midst of a dark tragedy. After years of faithful hard work, this is kind of the way my mind went. Faithful hard work, all those practices, now I'm just being tossed aside. It's a piece of garbage, it's all unjust. That being said, looking at it now, it was a very smart move by the coach. Frankly, I wasn't that good. And this is the killer was that there was a sophomore that year who was 15. He was as tall as I was and at least as good as I was. Why would you want a bench-warming senior center when you could have a sophomore you were training to take over? It made perfect sense. I couldn't see it at the time. So our gospel today centers upon St. Joseph, and he's in crisis. The woman he's engaged to marry is pregnant. He is not the father. Imagine how this world is turned upside down. Think of the plans he made for his and Mary's happiness. They're all there. And now those hopes and dreams seemingly wrecked. So he's confused. What's going on? He doesn't know. He's stumped. So my own high school hopes for a senior year on varsity basketball team really pales in comparison with the dreams of St. Joseph or the dreams, frankly, of many of you right now that at this very moment are threatened or ending. And I don't know what your dream is, but it could be a relationship, it could be a career, it could be children who are sick, and it could be health issues, all kinds of crises in your life. But I chose this one small incident of high school drama because it was a good example for me. I clearly remembered that I definitely didn't want what God gave me at that moment, but then I later came to see God's plan in it all. But at the time, I really did say, why me? Why this? Why does this have to happen? So today, in the homily, I just want to make one very simple point. You've heard it all before, so it's not new, but it bears repeating because it's so hard to believe and accept in the middle of the hurt and the crisis. So again, it helps to reinforce it. God has a bigger plan for you than you have for yourself. He has a bigger plan for you. I imagine Joseph, what was his plan? Wonderful prospective bride, wonderful happy marriage to come into, raising a family in Nazareth probably, handing over the carpentry business to his son someday. That, I suppose, was more or less what his dream was. God had bigger plans. Plans that Joseph had no idea. He'd be the foster father of the Messiah, Son of God. He didn't ask for that. That wasn't on his list of thinking, gee, what my future going to look like? That wasn't there at all. Joseph was planning for a happiness on a completely different and lower plane. But, he's an example of how a person can be used by God to accomplish his own secret plan that can't be understood at first in human terms. Again, why is this happening to me? So God has big plans for you. Now, maybe not big in the world's view in worldly terms, but he has a plan for your happiness and holiness that exists in his own mind that's on a different, higher plane than the plans and future that we usually think about and that you're thinking about right now. He's focused on the supernatural, not the natural goods. Our eternal happiness, not so much earthly concerns such as a high school basketball career. So what happened to me was the day after I was cut, the very day after I was cut, I applied for a job at the Mercer Island Safeway store. I told some of you before that I worked there. It doesn't exist anymore. It was closed decades ago. But there's a rule in my household. I've preached about this, I think, before. There's a rule in my household that when you hit age 16, you either had to play a sport or you had to have a job. That was the rule. You didn't have a choice. So I didn't have much of a choice when my best friend Mark, who worked at Safeway, he said there's a job bagging groceries just opened up. If you go there, I talked to the manager, Dirk Clough, and he's going to give you the job. I said, okay. I wasn't thrilled about this. I'd rather be playing varsity basketball. So now I have to go work. So I did. I went down there. Yeah, I got the job. Okay. I didn't know it. I would not have believed it at the time. It's the best thing that could have possibly happened to me. It shaped the rest of my life. Why? Because I worked at that store for the rest of my senior year, but then on through college and graduate school. It was a union job, good pay, full medical and dental benefits. And thanks to that job, I had my financial independence at age 19. And that put me through the University of Washington, a BA and an MA. Now, tuition was much cheaper, but it paid for my own apartment as well and my car on 30 hours a week. So I could go to school and work. I could make it all work for the next 7 years. I don't know what I would have done or what my life would have looked like if I had not had that job. I hadn't fallen into that, which I didn't want. It would have been very different, though. Harder, I think. Much harder. Yet it was only years later after I came back to the faith, because remember, at that time, I was not really a teen of faith. It was only years later I looked back at my history and I made this big connection between being cut and the next day getting this great job. And somebody's thinking, oh, that's kind of interesting. Kind of interesting connection there. Only then could I look back and see that God had a better plan for my happiness than I did. So God, again, is working for our happiness in the long term, and that means eternal heavenly term. He doesn't actually promise earthly success and happiness. Those who preach that message, that's not really true. That if you do follow me, you're going to get lots of money, you're going to be successful, etc. You may or may not. God has a plan. But he doesn't actually promise earthly success, happiness, a longer, comfortable life. That's not part of the plan. He doesn't promise you're going to make the team. In fact, I just say this to you high school students out there, or actually anybody. It's not always a bad thing not to make the team, or not to get the A, or not to get the school play part. That's okay. Don't fight for it. Don't be a jerk afterwards when that happens. Because again, it's not a bad thing. A no in life is not bad. It just means welcome to the real world. That's life. And it's a good thing. So God all he asks for is openness to his grace and his movement. And our lives are filled with challenges, crises, pain, seemingly lots of unanswered prayers. But I'd say before we despair, remember St. Joseph's dreams. I'm struck by what trust he had in God's plan and willingness to start from scratch and his assumption about what happiness would mean for him. He said, okay, plan A is done. God gave me plan B now. And it's going to be a completely different thing. It's going to take me to Egypt. I'm going to be threatened. My life's going to be, it's just going to be completely different. And he trusted God and said, okay. He woke from his dream and he did as God commanded him to do. So if we trust God, as St. Joseph did, and do as the Lord commands, we too will live God's dream, not our own. And that's going to be our joy.